just began to mount. Why the salt? Why the termination of this shaft? Or why didn't it come through to the chamber? I didn't really buy the argument that, well, they left it there just in case they needed air at a later date. You know, I don't know maybe what they're smoking when they come up with some of those ideas, but they just don't make any sense. And then there was other aspects of this that, you know, the floor was very rough. It had a niche in the wall. What were the reasons for that? And the smell. Early explorers exclaimed that it had a very noisome odor. So what was the smell? Also, exuding from the cracks in the limestone in these shafts was a white substance that was analyzed. It was found to be gypsum. Why gypsum? That's curious, why they would have gypsum oozing out of the shafts there. And we'll get into answer some of those questions, because there are reasonable answers for them. But you have to, you know, stretch your mind and move into areas that Egyptologists really don't want to go into. Then we get into the Grand Gallery. Some very curious features here. There's a corbelled walls along the ramps. Stephen mentioned there were 27 or 28 pair of slots. The slots were cut vertically into the ramps, not perpendicular with the slope. The slope is about 26 degrees and 30 minutes, and quite accurate, by the way. So what was the reason for this Grand Gallery? And then we come to the King's Chamber, the antechamber right here, and the small passageway into the King's Chamber, and then this curious design here. Around this area, what I focused on most, Petrie, as Stephen said, he wrote that the whole chamber had expanded over an inch, and they claimed that it must have been due to an earthquake. Now, remember what I first started to talk about when we talked about the lower part, the descending passage. Okay, we have an earthquake that's moving this chamber over an inch, but it's leaving this passageway still within the thickness of a thumbnail over 150 feet. Now, does that make sense to you? It doesn't to me. No other place in the Great Pyramid do you have such movement. So that was a question. The other question was, of course, these shafts coming in, this is the northern shaft. The dimensions of the northern shaft have special meaning. They're special dimensions, 8.4 by 4.8 inches. And then the southern shaft, directly opposite the northern shaft, has some unusual features that are also very important that we'll talk about too. But the real kicker, in my mind, was these overlying beams above the King's Chamber. And that really puzzled me. They were investigated in the the mid-1800s by Colonel Howard Vyse, and they drove upwards using blasting dynamite and discovered all these chambers above the King's Chamber, 5 layers of beams. They weigh up to 70 tons each, and there's over 40 of them. Now, the conventional hypothesis, a theory, is that these are relieving chambers. And, you know, I kind of irrelevant, I can't speak. How do you say familiar? Irreverently, I say, well, considering that you don't find any other bathrooms on the Giza plateau, maybe that's why you do. So these are what they call relieving chambers. But they were actually, you couldn't really get up there to do much without a very tall ladder. But if you look at the design, they're supposed to relieve the weight of the pyramid on top of this chamber right here, so that Khufu could have a flat ceiling. Because not only did he change his mind about being buried in this chamber, but he thought that a flat ceiling would be rather nice instead of this gable ceiling right here. And the really interesting design here is this is what they call a cantilevered design on the ceiling blocks, and that means that there is as much or more stone laying outside the walls as there are inside the walls, so that you have that balance. It's cantilevered, and there's no pressure or arch thrust where they meet in the middle. But getting back to the relieving chambers, as you can see, they are holding up no more than their own weight. The structural integrity is right here, with a similar design to what you would find here. And so my argument in the book is that if they wanted a flat ceiling in the Queen's Chamber, they could certainly create one. All they would have to do is add a layer of beams right here, and they would have a flat ceiling, and they won't have to worry about relieving chambers or anything like that. So that was the other thing. Now the other part was the tops of the beams were all rough. They had gouges in them, and the underside and the sides were square and parallel and perfectly flat. There was a reason for that. Also, the other question was, why the granite? They went from limestone to granite. They changed to granite right here. The floor is granite. The walls and all of these beams came from Aswan, which is 500 miles down the Nile, up the Nile. Sorry, I get that mixed up, you know. But anyway, the granite was quarried 500 miles away, weighing up to 70 tons apiece, brought down to the Giza Plateau, and then raised up into the pyramid 200 feet up in the air. At this level right here, we're about 175 feet from the bedrock. So, you know, we're looking at quite a lot of work just to have some beams that are holding up nothing more than their own weight. There was definitely a specific reason for them. And we'll get into some of those reasons. So to summarize, basically, that was the conventional nomenclature, which I changed, and I will summarize thus, that in the so-called Queen's Chamber, it was actually a reaction chamber. And they had two solutions coming through the shafts and into this chamber, combining to create hydrogen. The hydrogen interacted with the limestone, and you had the leaching of salts from the limestone. That's why you had salt up to an inch thick here. It also, in this shaft right here, I proposed that there was a dilute hydrochloric acid solution coming in this way, and then zinc chloride solution here. Those are two possible chemicals that, when mixed, would create hydrogen. But the hydrochloric acid solution, its action with the limestone would create gypsum. That's another result of a chemical reaction there. So we explained the salt, we explained the gypsum, and also possibly the noisome odor as described by Smythe when he was in the pyramid in the 1800s. So that's our reaction chamber. We get hydrogen. Why do we want hydrogen? Hydrogen is the signature of the universe. The frequency of hydrogen bombards this planet on a daily basis. It's 21 centimeters, 8.309 inches. 8.309 inches. Oh, let's see. Let's refer back to the northern shaft in the King's Chamber, 8.4 inches. And a waveguide for a hydrogen microwave, the suitable waveguide would be the wavelength. The width would be the wavelength, and then the height approximately a half of the wavelength. So there is another explanation or another solution to why the dimensions. I proposed that the Grand Gallery was a resonator hall. And the reason why, there was several events that transpired before I actually theorized that. One was